All right, breaking news now from the National Hurricane Center. Hurricane Beryl is a Category 4. This is the earliest a storm this strong has ever been recorded in the Atlantic. And now the government of Grenada says it will declare a state of emergency effective Sunday, 7 p.m. in anticipation of Beryl, which is expected to hit the island in the next 24 hours. And the islands of Trinidad and Tobago are canceling inter-island ferries as well. This is developing quickly, and we're watching Beryl from the CNN Center with Elisa Raffa. And from the ground, Patrick Ottman is in Havana. So first to you, Lisa. Yes, this is alarming just looking at the graphics and hearing the number. Category 4.
Yeah, and it rapidly intensified. At this time yesterday, it was still a tropical storm, and I put this loop on. That was only 12 hours ago. Not much organization. Now look at that eye, how crisp, how clear, how symmetric. That tells us that it is rapidly intensifying, becoming this dangerous, devastating, or potentially devastating storm. A Category 4 storm right now, 130-mile-per-hour winds, sitting about 310 miles east and southeast of Barbados. This is the farthest east that we have ever had a hurricane in the Atlantic. It is the earliest that we have ever had a Category 4 hurricane, the first Category 4 in the month of June ever, the earliest major hurricane within 100 miles of Barbados and Grenada. So just incredible to see this early in the season. Here's the track. It maintains Category 4 strength as it heads to the Windward Islands. We've got some hurricane warnings in effect there, and then it keeps its major status as it cuts across the Caribbean Sea. Places like Jamaica could see some of these hurricane force winds, and you could see all the tropical storm force winds. They could arrive even on the overnight tonight for some of these islands, and they'll really have to watch out for that. The reason why we're talking about rapid intensification is because these ocean temperatures are incredibly warm. We're talking middle and upper 80s, 3 to 5 degrees above average. This is more typical for late August and early September. That is fuel for hurricanes, and that's what's letting it rapidly intensify. As our oceans continue to get warmer because of climate change, this is more fuel for stronger hurricanes, and you could see that trend in recent years, becoming extremely stronger, faster. Fred?
Okay. Thank you so much. Of course, it's going to be critical over the next few hours to watch its path. Thank you, Elisa. All right, Patrick Ottman now in Havana. How are people in the Caribbean overall preparing?
You know, what you were just talking about really makes it even more of a dangerous storm, because that rapid intensification means that people have less time to prepare. To go from a tropical storm to a Category 4 hurricane is terrifying. And for people who live in low-lying islands where you're not able to get out of the hurricane's path, the best thing you can do is just find shelter. It becomes even more difficult when you talk about a storm like a Category 4 hurricane that will bring with it catastrophic damage. That is the term the National Hurricane Center uses for Category 4 and higher storms. And that simply means that even if you are indoors, even if you are in a place that has survived other storms over the past, it may not be enough. You really need to be in a concrete structure like a school, like you know, some kind of bunker type facility that's constructed to withstand this kind of storm, because so many places, particularly when you're on low-lying coastal areas, simply cannot put up with the wind damage that can be caused by a Category 4 hurricane, and of course the storm surge, which is the most dangerous part of a hurricane. So people are getting ready, and the question is whether or not they have enough time to do so.
All right, Patrick Ottman, thank you so much. Elisa Raffa as well. We'll keep checking back with you throughout the afternoon.
All right, happening now, hurricane warnings are in effect for parts of the Caribbean, including Barbados, St. Lucia, and the Grenadines. Hurricane Beryl is now a powerful Category 3 storm. Let's get right to CNN's Elisa Raffa with the latest on this. What are you seeing?
We're watching this eye very closely, because the only reason why it came down to a Category 3 intensity overnight is because we were going through something called the eye wall replacement cycle. The structure is changing just a little bit, and you can see where it got a little bit cloudy overnight, but it's starting to clear up again. That's telling us that it's gaining intensity and could come back up to that Category 4 status. We're watching it closely. Either way, you have outer bands already lashing parts of Barbados, Grenada as well, some of these islands. Category 3, as it stands right now, 120-mile-per-hour winds, sitting 125 miles east and southeast of Grenada. Again, already seeing some of these outer bands. We've been watching some of these showers clip parts of Barbados and some of these islands as well, some of these Windward Islands on this radar. And you can see there's that eye wall, how intense that is. And that looks like that eye wall heads towards St. Vincent and Grenada as we go through the day today. Barbados already looking at 43-mile-per-hour sustained winds. Gusts have already been up to 60 miles per hour. So this will continue as we go through the day today. Again, you've got hurricane warnings because we're looking at some catastrophic damage possible from those intense winds in the eye wall. We're also looking at some 6 to 9 feet of storm surge possible. There it is with the intensity coming back up to a 4, like I mentioned, and then we continue to scrape the Caribbean Sea. A lot of these islands like Jamaica already have some watches in effect for parts of Haiti and the Dominican Republic, and then eventually headed up towards Mexico by the end of the week. The reason we're talking about such an incredibly strong storm so early in the season is because these ocean temperatures are in the middle and upper 80s. This is the first time we've ever had a Category 4 hurricane in June this early in the season. It underwent rapid intensification over the weekend, took less than 24 hours for it to go from a tropical storm to a Category 4 hurricane, and we find that trend getting extremely stronger faster more recently because of climate change and our warming oceans. John?
We were talking about Beryl. This is Hurricane Beryl. There's another tropical storm you're looking at?
Yeah, we are also watching Chris. That is also a depression right now. So there's Beryl. There's another chance of development right behind it. Chris made landfall in Mexico overnight. Just in the last couple of minutes, it's down to a depression, but could still soak them with some rain, couple of inches of rain possible the next couple of days. John?
All right, Elisa Raffa, thank you very much for all of that. Sarah?
All right. Hurricane Beryl now slamming into the Caribbean, and it's back to being a powerful Category 4 storm. It is expected to barrel through the Windward Islands, bringing violent winds and flash flooding, while St. Vincent and the Grenadines and Grenada are especially at risk. Beryl's arrival marks an active start to the Atlantic hurricane season. We've got team coverage for you tracking this dangerous storm. Before I head to the weather centre, let's bring in Patrick Ottman, who is in Havana today. It's no secret that island has been pummeled in the past, of course. When you look across to where this hurricane is bearing down at present, how are officials and residents in these communities in the Caribbean coping and preparing? Patrick.
Oh, it's so difficult to prepare, of course, when you have a hurricane that on Saturday was a tropical storm, something of a regular event in this part of the world. And then within 24 hours, it becomes a category, very, very powerful Category 4 hurricane. And so that just means that people don't have enough time to prepare for that kind of storm, because we're talking about a very different storm. When the National Hurricane Center talks about catastrophic damage caused by the strongest forms of hurricanes, that really means that just sheltering in your home probably isn't enough. You're very likely to lose your roof. You need to seek shelter much higher ground away from the water, which is not easy on a small Caribbean island. And you really need to be in a school or a shelter, hospital, something like that, that is built to withstand these kinds of upper level winds. So on a small island in the Caribbean where you may not have enough supplies, where you cannot get out of the path of the storm, we've seen people gassing up, we've seen people getting food and reinforcing the residences, and that's about all you can do. The scary thing, of course, is that people have so much less time to prepare when you have a storm like this that intensifies so rapidly. There's really nothing typical about this storm that, here we are, July 1st, looking at a major hurricane. It's very, very scary. It's going to cause damage in the Windward Islands, probably continue through the Caribbean, perhaps impacting places like Haiti, Jamaica, as it continues with Mexico in its sights. But of course, this is just the beginning of hurricane season, and we are expecting to have one of the busiest hurricane seasons on record. So lots of more of these storms to come, unfortunately.
And Patrick, just explain why this storm is already one for the record books.
Well, we've never had a category storm form this early. You look at the water temperature in the Caribbean right now, and it feels more like August or September. And that is the fuel for hurricanes, the heat of the water, which of course is influenced by climate change. That's the gasoline, if you will, for hurricanes. So you're going to have hurricanes that develop and intensify much earlier. And what that means for someone on a small Caribbean island is they will just have less time to prepare, and time all too often, Becky, means whether or not you survive a storm or not.
Good to have you, Patrick. Thank you. Let's bring in Elisa Raffa from the CNN Weather Center. You're tracking this storm. What are you seeing at this point?
It has really intensified over the last 24 hours. I mean, we already had that Category 4 storm yesterday, but overnight it did what we call an eye wall replacement cycle, where that structure is just resetting itself a little bit. And what that did is that made that eye much stronger. You can see just how clear it is there on satellite, and it's fatter. You have those hurricane and tropical storm force winds making it much farther out from the center, more than 120 miles out from the center. As some of these outer bands start to get into some of these windward islands, Barbados already seeing gusts over 60 miles per hour. So it's a Category 4 storm right now, continuing to maintain that major strength of 130 miles per hour, moving west, and it's 60 miles east there of Grenada. And you can see some of these winds have already been gusting up to 60 miles per hour in Barbados. The sustained winds at 43 miles per hour. The core of this eye wall here, we're talking about potentially catastrophic impacts because of how intense the winds are. Also, with how strong it is, it will wash some of that ocean water. We're talking about storm surge 6 to 9 feet. So again, incredibly dangerous. Rain as well, 3 to 6 inches of rain. Some of the higher elevations of some of these mountainous areas could see up to 10 inches of rain. So just incredible. It maintains this strength as it goes through some of the Caribbean Sea here. You've got hurricane warnings in effect. It will bring some impacts. You can see the tropical storm watch from southern Haiti and the Dominican Republic. It continues its trek towards Mexico by the end of the week as it treks across the Caribbean Sea. We're talking about ocean temperatures in the middle and upper 80s. This is why it intensified so quickly over the weekend and why it's the first Category 4 storm that we've ever seen this early in the season. Becky.
Good to have you. Thank you. And stay safe if you are in the eye of this storm in that region in the Caribbean.
Right now, Category 5 Hurricane Beryl is headed toward Jamaica with winds of 165 miles per hour. This is a record-breaking storm, and it's also not only dangerous, it's huge. It's the strongest hurricane to pass through the eastern part of the Caribbean since 1851. The storm's already left a trail of destruction across the islands of Grenada, St. Vincent, the Grenadines, where power is still knocked out in many places this morning. CNN's Elisa Raffa and Patrick Ottman, they're tracking this all for us. Elisa, where is the storm right now?
Finally exiting some of those windward islands that it just devastated yesterday. Continues to look like a healthy, strong storm. You have that huge, crystal clear eye that's perfectly symmetrical, signs of a monster Category 5 hurricane with 165 mile per hour winds. It's still sitting about 600 to 700 miles east of Jamaica, and it's been able to rapidly intensify multiple times because these ocean temperatures are in the middle and upper 80s, acting like late August, early September. That's why, we're in the early July and we're kind of acting like it's peak hurricane season. As Beryl continues to work its way east, it will run into some dust, which could eat away at some of that intensity as we go into the day today. But it's still going to remain a major hurricane as it heads towards Jamaica. You've got hurricane warnings in effect where hurricane force conditions will start as we go into Wednesday, looking at storm surge up to 3 to 5 feet. You've got watches in effect for the Cayman Islands, and then eventually it will get towards Mexico as we get towards the end of the week. We're looking at rainfall totals of 3 to 6 inches, maybe even up to a foot in parts of Jamaica, especially in those higher elevations. Like I mentioned, we're looking at hurricane force winds in Jamaica, but tropical storm force winds will scrape Haiti, the Dominican Republic. Again, worried about hurricane force conditions in the Cayman Islands. What happens after all of this? Well, it really depends on this area of high pressure that's bringing some heat to the south in the U.S. Depending on how weak or strong this high pressure is will determine if this thing continues to work its way east and if it kind of nudges north or south. Something we'll have to watch closely in the next couple of days, Kate.
Absolutely, Elisa. Thank you so much. Pat.
Bring in CNN's Elisa Raffa, who's standing by for us at the CNN Weather Center. So obviously this hurricane has intensified pretty quickly. Where is it going next? Do we expect it to stay this strong at a Category 5?
So it's holding steady at a Category 5 right now, but we are expecting some weakening as we go through the day today, but it will still head towards Jamaica as a major hurricane. Right now, it is still holding steady with 165-mile-per-hour winds. This eye on satellite has been so clear, so symmetrical, and that is the sign of a monster Category 5 hurricane. Gusts have been over 200 miles per hour, and it is booking it west and northwest at 22 miles per hour. We've been watching it rapidly intensify multiple times because these ocean temperatures are in the middle and upper 80s. That is way above average. It's acting more like the peak of hurricane season, like late August or early September, which is why we're dealing with the earliest Category 5 hurricane on record. It will run into some dust, a little bit of wind shear as it gets towards Jamaica through the day today, which is why some of that intensity might get shaved off just a little bit. But we're still looking at maybe a Category 3 or 4 as it heads towards Jamaica. There are hurricane warnings in effect there. They're expecting those hurricane force conditions to start as we go into Wednesday. Storm surge could get up to 4 to 6 feet in some spots. Hurricane watch in effect for the Cayman Islands, and this continues its trek towards Mexico as we go towards the end of the week. Here are some of these rain totals. We could be looking at upwards of 6 inches of rain in parts of Jamaica, maybe even up to a foot in some of those highest elevations. Patrick was mentioning it's a mountainous island that could cause some problems with flooding and landslides. And then here's a look at the tropical storm force winds. Of course, we have eyes on Jamaica, but we get scraped with tropical storm force winds for parts of southern Dominican Republic and Haiti as well. Cayman Islands would be next up on that list of concerns. What happens after this? Well, we have this area of high pressure that's sitting over the southern U.S., bringing us some extreme heat. It depends on how weak or strong this high pressure is. Depending on kind of what that high does, we're looking at this storm continuing its trek across the Caribbean Sea. That's why it's not making a turn towards Florida, because this high is there. But depending on how weak or strong that is, will determine if it nudges farther north or farther south. That can mean the difference between a Mexico hurricane or maybe something a little bit closer to Texas. Omar?
Elisa Raffa, thank you for tracking that path. Good to see that perspective.
Right now, Jamaica is under a curfew and waiting for the monster storm Hurricane Beryl to arrive. Beryl is in line for a direct hit on the island as a powerful Category 4 storm. The core of Beryl is expected to impact Jamaica by midday, bringing winds around 140 miles per hour and generating life-threatening storm surge as well. The island has not had a major hurricane come even within 50 miles of its shore since 2007. But already, this storm has killed at least 7 people across the Caribbean. We're going to show you the view right there. That is the view from hurricane hunters flying above the storm yesterday. Beryl quickly became the earliest ever Cat 5 hurricane in the Atlantic. Thankfully, it has weakened slightly, albeit again, slightly. It's still a Cat 4. Meteorologist Elisa Raffa is in the CNN Weather Center for us. CNN's Rafael Romo is in Jamaica's capital city waiting for it all. Rafael, what are you seeing there? What's happening?
Okay, good morning. Well, here is the calm before the storm. We had rain about 30 minutes ago here where we're standing in Kingston, the capital, but the winds have died down. There's no more rain anymore, but this is going to drastically change in the next few hours. And overnight, we heard from Jamaican Prime Minister Andrew Holness, who said that his country must take this hurricane very seriously. And the reality is that there's a great deal of anxiety among the population. People here have seen what happened in places like Barbados and Grenada and know the same kind of devastation can come their way in the next few hours. So there's a lot of people who are very nervous right now, people who flock to the stores to get those necessities, food, water, and other things. Also, we have heard from a top government official here who told us the main concern for the government was that they needed to warn people who live in low-lying areas to move to safer ground. Senator Andrew Samuda said that the government is making available more than 780 shelters for people who may need it. And this is the earliest hurricane, a Category 5 hurricane, on record in the Atlantic, and it has already ripped through parts of the South Caribbean, killing at least 7 people in 3 different countries. The Prime Minister also said that all government forces are going to be fully mobilized, and they're going to assist in relief efforts and also to make sure they can maintain public order once the hurricane has passed. This is what he had to say.
If you live in a low-lying area, and an area historically prone to flooding and landslide, or if you live on the banks of a river or a gully, I implore you to evacuate to a shelter or to safer ground.
And Kate, the path of the hurricane becomes less clear Thursday night. It is expected to make a landfall somewhere alongside Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula and northern Belize at some point between Thursday night and Friday morning. Now back to you.
Rafael, thank you so much for that. Let's talk more about the track, what Jamaica is about to see. Let's bring in Elisa Raffa now. Elisa, talk to me about the latest on the track, what Jamaica needs to be preparing for, and what you're seeing.
I mean, for Jamaica, this could be something that they haven't seen literally in decades. We're talking about a Category 4 hurricane still with 145-mile-per-hour sustained winds. And look at the history that they've had with major hurricanes. This is going back to 1980. You can see a lot have made passes, but only one has made landfall. That was Gilbert in 1988. We're talking more than 40 years since they've dealt with possibly a direct hit like this. We could see landfall on the southern part of the island. Even if that eye doesn't go on land, it will pass awfully close. We're talking about up to 9 feet of storm surge, incredibly heavy rain for the island, and then it continues to pass as we get towards the end of the week, headed towards Mexico. Now, when we talk about heavy rain, we're talking about up to a foot possible in parts of Jamaica because the way this moisture is coming in, tropical moisture rushing up the mountains, that will enhance some of the rainfall totals and get them closer to a foot. So really worried about landslides and flash flooding. What we also need to watch is there is some wind shear or that wind energy that tries to kill hurricanes. It's nearby, so we'll have to see if this can waver that intensity at all, but we still have some record warm ocean temperatures as well, so we'll need to watch this very closely in the coming days. Kate?
Absolutely. Elise, thank you so much.
Hurricane Beryl is soaking the Cayman Islands at this hour. The Category 3 storm now whipping winds of 120 miles per hour. Beryl pounded Jamaica's southern coast yesterday, 12 hours of unrelenting torrential rain. Let's get to meteorologist Elisa Raffa. So, Elisa, where does it head next?
We're setting our eyes on Mexico next as we go into tomorrow. Right now, we're still looking at tropical storm force conditions in the Cayman Islands. They're expecting some flash flooding as well from several inches of rain that they've already gotten. Still a major Category 3 hurricane with 120-mile-per-hour winds with that center sitting 50 miles to the southwest of Grand Cayman. They've had gusts this morning over 55 miles per hour in Grand Cayman Island. Right now, we're still finding gusts over 40 miles per hour with some storm surge up to 4 feet. Now, as we go through the next day, we could find some additional weakening because there's this big area of wind shear right ahead of Beryl. Wind shear is that wind energy upstairs in the atmosphere, and hurricanes hate it. It really chops away at some of the intensity, which is why we have found this kind of slowly coming down since it hit Jamaica. But it will continue to maintain hurricane strength as it gets towards Mexico going into tomorrow. Looking at another landfall here somewhere on the Yucatan Peninsula, could find that storm surge there up to 4 to 6 feet, and you can see that eye again continues to stay with hurricane strength near Cancun and Cozumel. And then we're looking at it getting back into the Gulf of Mexico where it's got warm waters again and can intensify for another time. We're rain forecast. We're looking at some 4 to 6 inches of rain across the Yucatan Peninsula. Even some totals up to 10 inches are possible, and that could cause some flash flooding concerns. So here's that official track. You find it maintaining hurricane strength. That's why you've got the hurricane warnings in effect along the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico. Then it gets back into the Gulf where it could intensify again, maybe make another landfall as a hurricane somewhere on the border of Texas. And we'll have to watch this closely to see where the heaviest rain and storm surge could set up as we go into the weekend. We're really watching this dome of high pressure that's causing heat across the south to see if this weakens any, if it can make that turn to the north into Texas as we go into the weekend and going into early next week. So something to watch pretty closely. Allison.
Okay, Elisa, thank you very much for all of that.
All right, right now, Hurricane Beryl has just made landfall in Mexico after hammering the Cayman Islands yesterday. The storm weakened slightly to Category 2 earlier this morning, and it is expected to unload damaging winds and torrential rain over most of the Yucatan Peninsula. The confirmed death toll in the Caribbean now stands at 9 after a second fatality was reported in Jamaica. Meteorologist Elisa Raffa is joining us now with more on where the storm is going and what its potential still is.
Yeah, I mean, we're watching it make landfall right now, the center of the storm near Tulum, Mexico, with 110-mile-per-hour winds. It re-intensified overnight. You could see how symmetrical it was in the water, starting to lose a little bit of its shape as it gets on land, but still expecting dangerous storm surge of 4 to 6 feet in the area. When we're talking about rain, we're talking about 4 to 6 inches of rain across the Yucatan Peninsula. Could find some totals up to 10 inches, which would cause some flash flooding. After this, by tonight, we're looking at it getting back into the Gulf of Mexico here, where it could re-intensify. We do have some very warm waters here, warm for this time of year, so it could get its act together a little bit more before it looks at another landfall somewhere in northern Mexico or even South Texas. We're finding this dome of heat and humidity, this area of high pressure, continuing to weaken some and move out of the way. So that's allowing Beryl to kind of make this turn to the north and start impacting Texas later on this weekend. We're talking about Sunday. We could even start to see some impacts. We could have some watches issued later on today. So there's that track. You can see possibly another hurricane landfall as it gets into Texas. Either way, rip currents the entire holiday weekend. Fred.
All right. And then, Lisa, an extremely dangerous heat wave is intensifying on the West Coast. Here we go again. How long is this going to go on?
This is the problem, Fred, is a lot of these warnings last well into next week. I'm talking some of them even go until Thursday because this is going to be an incredibly long duration event with temperatures well over 100 for a lot of these places. Most of California under these warnings, parts of Nevada there, even going up to into the Pacific Northwest, place like Portland and Seattle that really don't have too much air conditioning. Temperatures up near 120 degrees in Palm Springs. You could see multiple days straight going into next week. Bakersfield as well. Fresno with temperatures up around 111 going into Monday. Las Vegas could hit their all-time hottest temperature ever recorded. It's 117, and we're forecast to break that by Sunday. So just incredible. We're looking at more than 500 records falling, a lot of them up and down the West Coast, both daytime highs and overnight lows, because we just don't get this relief at night at all. And like I said, the heat extends up towards Seattle. We're talking about triple-digit temperatures in Medford, Oregon, a lot of their all-time records in jeopardy as well. So just really thinking of those people, especially without that relief at night. Fred.
Sure. All right, Elisa Raffa, thank you so much.
Beryl is expected to gain strength and turn into a Category 1 hurricane before slamming into the southern coast of Texas. Several counties in the track of the storm have issued mandatory evacuation orders, with Beryl expected to bring damaging winds, life-threatening storm surge, and dangerous flooding.
The storm is on track to hit the Texas coast Monday morning. Beryl has already wreaked havoc across the Caribbean. 9 people have been killed. CNN's Elisa Raffa is tracking the storm's path for us, so this continues.
Yeah, it kind of didn't have too much change yesterday because some dry air was getting into it, kind of keeping it at bay. But that gets out of the way today, and we're expecting it to strengthen over the next 24 hours. We're dealing with a tropical storm right now, but by later on today, we could be talking about a Category 1 hurricane. We've got winds right now in this at 60 miles per hour. It's starting to wake up a little bit again as it's been dealing with some of that dry air, starting to gain some of its strength, and we'll continue to see that as we go through the day today. Radar is starting to pick up on some of these outer bands. Haven't really hit land too much yet, but look at all that lightning. These outer bands, the way that they have some of these little isolated storms in them, that's where you're going to get a tornado threat that really picks up even by this evening. Ocean temperatures so incredibly warm in the Gulf of Mexico. That's why we're talking about possibly another rapid intensification just before it hits landfall, and that makes it a Category 1 hurricane. Hurricane warnings in effect from Corpus Christi up the coastline. Houston is in a tropical storm warning as these winds just continue to push inland. I mean, we're talking about winds up to 73 miles per hour, the tropical storm force winds, including places like Houston and Galveston. You see that red there, Matagorda Bay, that's where we could find some of those hurricane force winds over 74 miles per hour. So again, we start with these impacts even by this afternoon. The outer bands are already coming in, storm surge already sloshing in, a couple of tornadoes already possible. That landfall coming probably on the overnight tonight. That's when we'll get those those hurricane force winds along the coast very early tomorrow morning. Look at the torrential heavy rain. And then all of that heavy rain works its way inland. We have flood watches that stretch pretty far inland. Storm surge up to 6 feet possible. Again, that ocean water that just gets dragged in with the hurricane force winds. Look at the rainfall totals, 5 to 10 inches. That could cause considerable damage, life-threatening. Storm surge, again, the flooding could be considerable, something that we'll need to watch very closely. Water is the biggest killer in a hurricane.
Yeah, and they've certainly had their share of weather emergencies over the last year or so. So, Elisa Raffa, thanks so much.